I just want to take a moment to thank our sponsors, the Zebra, Simpson, and our newest sponsor, Atlantic Union Bank, for their financial support. But we are member supported. And so I really want to thank our members and especially our sustaining members for providing us with the mechanisms so that we can hold these kinds of events. It would not be possible without them. Okay, time to begin. We have an awesome panel here. And I'm going to ask Shelley and John and Jeff and Roy to spend a moment introducing themselves, and then we're going to jump into questions. The questions are binned in terms of topical category. We're first going to talk about the current housing crisis. We're going to then talk about programs and services that can help for affordability. We're going to talk about the economic challenges, and we're going to talk about the challenges to population and character, which is important in a 15 square mile city like Alexandria. So without further ado, Shelley, you want to introduce yourself.
Right. Good evening. I'm Shelley McCabe. I am the former CEO of Wesley Housing, and I retired a couple of years ago and am involved in a number of housing organizations. As it says, I am co-chair of AHAC, but I am not speaking for AHAC this evening. I am speaking on my own behalf.
John?
Good evening, everyone. Nice to be with you tonight. Thanks for having me. My name is John Frederick. I serve as the president and CEO of Housing Alexandria. Housing Alexandria is a nonprofit housing developer that works exclusively within the city limits of Alexandria. It has been, was founded based on a citizens initiative group and has been operating since 2004, so almost over 20 years.
Good evening, Jeff DeBoer. I'm the president and CEO of the Real Estate Roundtable in Washington. By the way, back in around 1983, I think I was standing here playing shortstop when it was a softball field. The Real Estate Roundtable, I started representing real estate nationally in 1982 out of law school, and in 96 started a group called the Real Estate Roundtable, which brings together kind of the leaders in commercial real estate, including multifamily housing, and then the national trade groups, the realtors, the home builders, mortgage bankers, et cetera, et cetera. And we work on public policy. And what we try to do is to bring different views together to find the right solution. And that's why I was very happy when you had a vacancy on this panel and I was called up last minute to do this. So I'm happy to be here because I think it's a great thing. I'm an Alexandria, long-term Alexandria resident, and happy to be involved with this. Roy?
Right.
So I'm Roy Bird. I'm the chair of the Coalition for a Livable Alexandria. We're a nonprofit as well, a 501(c), and our basic purpose is to look at all sides of all issues and help disseminate that information and kind of be a forum within the city of Alexandria where all sides can have a voice and be heard. And we look at all types of issues, economic. Livability obviously is in our name, and we've been intimately involved in the housing issues here in Alexandria, and again look forward to discussing ways that we can maybe meet and solve these challenging problems.
All right, let's start with terminology. We've got several terms on the table, and I would love it if you guys want to pop off quick answers for what it means for the term affordability, affordable housing, committed affordable, naturally occurring affordable, workforce, and market rate. So I don't know, Shelley, you want to start with affordable and how that works?
Sure. Often when people speak of affordable housing, they think of housing that is affordable for those folks who sit at 80% or below of what we call the area median income. So 100% of the median income in Alexandria is somewhere around $164,000 for a household of 4. So that gives you some sort of a rough idea. It comes in a couple of flavors. There is committed affordable, which usually is affordable to households at much lower income levels and involves some sort of subsidies of some kind. They may be city, they may be state, they may be federal, they may be all of the above and often are. And then there's naturally occurring affordable, which are those rental homes that, by virtue of their age and condition, become affordable at rents that are below the market.
Quick question. Does affordable housing automatically translate into subsidized housing?
No.
Okay.
I mean, affordable housing, really, I think of it as housing that's affordable. Everybody should be able to live in housing that's affordable for them.
Okay. And you covered committed affordable. What does naturally occurring affordable mean?
That's rental housing that usually by its age or condition rents below the current market rents. And therefore, there's no restrictions on it. You know, there's nothing from the government or any lender that says it has to be rented at or below this rental level. It just happens to rent there based usually on age and condition of the property.
Okay. John, workforce affordable, or workforce housing, sorry.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, usually, historically, workforce housing really meant 80% of AMI, maybe to 100% of area median income. Shelley gave you the numbers on what AMIs are. I think over time, what's interesting is that that terminology has continued to morph and will continue to morph, because many of our folks that are in currently kind of what we would have considered historically affordable or kind of subsidized affordable are really our workforce, right? And so that's why that term gets really, really confusing, is that even you know, projects that were 60%, which historically would be affordable, are really now kind of a more of a workforce product. So it really, it kind of highlights the kind of the continuum of housing and the levels of affordability that we kind of need to have.
Okay. I'm going to throw this to you, John.
Yeah.
People speak in terms of an affordable housing crisis with the emphasis on the word crisis. Why do we have a crisis?
Well, there's probably a lot of reasons why we have a crisis, and we could spend all night talking about it. But the reality is that historically, in Alexandria, for example, we used to have a lot more market affordable housing, right? So kind of same definition as naturally occurring affordable housing. And if you look at the stats, you know, over the last 25 years, you know, we've lost upwards of 15 to 20,000 units of market affordable housing. And the reason for that is not because those units were knocked down or replaced or anything like that. It's just that their rents have grown faster than incomes. And so the crisis is that folks that are in, you know, what we would consider historically very nice starter jobs or kind of middle income jobs simply can't afford to live in, you know, areas, metropolitan areas like Alexandria, but really throughout the country. And the question of why, I mean, I'm sure lots have many reasons for why, but, excuse me, really a lot of it stems back to the housing crisis of 2008. We really stopped building housing for a long time, and we got behind, and now there's more demand than there is housing, and it has continued to create you know, housing affordability issues or the housing crisis.
Now, Jeff, when we spoke, you talked a little bit about how banking has changed since 2008. And how does that factor into where we are now?
By the way, I think that's a very good explanation. Look, we were pretty much imbalanced nationally in housing up to about 2008, 2009. After the crisis, bank lending to home builders dropped substantially. Interest rates dropped substantially and stayed low for a long period of time. Wages stagnated, and demand kept growing. And so if your supply is down, the ability to get financing because of your incomes is off and interest rates are down, then those people who could get homes could bid up the price as the demand grew. And so there's a lot of people who were able to get homes with cheap financing, and they now have low interest loans. Recall, as recently as 2022, a 30-year mortgage rate was about sub 3%, all right? And in 2019, the Fed funds rate was a quarter of a percent. So very, very low rates. And then along comes the rest of this period, 2020 to now, where you had a huge spike in interest rates, a still stagnant wage base, still demand in the product, and it's still not as much product being built as it should be. So affordability problem, but I think it's a problem up and down the income spectrum by and large. We need to build all kinds of housing, up and down for everybody, I think. And it's not necessarily. I don't think of it as a right to have housing, but you should have the right to get housing. And so you should be able, if you don't have the right kind of income, and Alexandria has a great rental assistance program. Maybe it needs a little more juice in it to help some other people. Maybe there's some other things, but you should be able to get housing regardless of your wealth or your income.
So Jeff, if I understand the timeline correctly, are you suggesting that the crisis part of the housing crisis is a post-pandemic phenomenon?
I think it has evidenced itself in this time period. Back in 1980 or 81, people thought it was a housing crisis. Mortgage loans were at 17%, right? So it was a crisis then. It calmed down. There was another crisis probably right around 9/11, and there's a crisis today. And if it is a crisis, and again, I don't want to compliment you, I think all parties, all stakeholders need to get together. The elected officials, developers, advocates, low-income housing groups, citizens should all get together to find a solution. No one group of those people acting alone is going to find a solution. So I would applaud you on that. But yeah, I think it's a crisis today. And
John, I said Shelley was reacting and John was reacting. I want to make sure you guys both have a shot at it. And Roy, weigh in if you'd like. I mean, this is supposed to be a discussion. So did you guys want to?
I was only going to say that I think that 2008 and after, as we've been talking about, kind of pushed the affordability issues up the income ladder a little bit. I think in major metropolitan areas, the kind of very low incomes have always had a lot of problems. But I think what people realize more and more from 2010 on is those making those very, what we used to consider very middle income wages, unable to access housing. So it has continued to push the crisis up the income ladder.
I would just add to that, and I agree with everyone on this panel. I mean, so we've already accomplished the mission.
There we go.
Right?
You can go home now.
But I think there's some other factors that we also need to recognize that have a significant impact on the issue of affordability. One, when we talk about the wages or say what somebody's coming out of college, what they're making, that starter job or whatever, is student debt. Student debt is at a rate that we've never seen before. Colleges, the price of college has just gone up astronomically year after year. And so in Alexandria, 14% of households with people under 40, 14% of them have student loan debt. And the average in Virginia for ages 18 to 29 is $23,000. In Alexandria, it's $28,000. And for age 30 to 39, where you're talking about more advanced degrees, it's $42,000 is the average in Virginia, and it's $52,000 in Alexandria. So how does that impact affordability? Well, if you're trying to get a mortgage, right, your debt to income ratio, it's not just the income you're bringing in, you have debt that you have to pay off. That means you're going to get a higher interest rate. That means you maybe won't be able to qualify for a mortgage. If you can't qualify to buy a home, that means you have to rent a home. That means that you put more pressure on rental housing. So all these things kind of come together. And then we can't neglect the impact of taxes. Property taxes also impact, and they're added on to a mortgage. So again, it causes that ratio to go higher to qualify for a loan. And so you kind of get caught into this catch-22 period. So we do have to look at everything surrounding affordability and not just one or two factors. You have to look at the entire.
If I could, I think that's right. And then you also have to look at the construction workers,
Yes.
shortage of construction workers, inflation on their wages, inflation on materials to build houses, tariffs causing the price of materials to build all kinds of houses going up. So there's all these things that are causing supply and development to slow a little bit. But again, Alexandria, I think, is ahead of the game, frankly.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Alexandria. So I guess there could be two ways of looking at it. One is let's work really hard to make sure that we have affordability in the city. Another way of looking at it is there's a lot of real estate around the city. Why is the city working so hard to bring affordability here? And Shelley, I think you have some thoughts on the subject.
Yeah, I said that it should be housing that's affordable. So when I'm out in the community, there's a couple of things that I hear a lot, and one is my children can't afford to buy and grow up in the neighborhood that they grew up. They can't afford to live in the neighborhood they grew up in because prices are too high. And I think we've talked about some of the reasons that is. That plus there are no starter homes being built, right? And one of the other things I hear though is we don't want to build more because we don't want more traffic, we don't want more congestion and those sorts of things. I have to say though, people are coming here to work. So if they can't afford to live near where they work, they are driving on the roads and they are causing more traffic, more congestion, affecting residents' quality of life. So even though Alexandria has done well in terms of new rental homes particularly starts, maybe not so much in terms of homes to buy, there's still a need. There's definitely a need at lower income levels for those folks who provide the backbone of our economy. Our economy right now is very much focused on retail, tourism, trade. Those wages don't support market rate rents in Alexandria, much less buying a home. So if those people can't afford to live near where they work, they're traveling here to do those jobs. And we are probably better off with our new hospital and everything going in, making sure we've got adequate housing for people at that. I love John's use of workforce. People who are working at extremely low income jobs qualify for committed affordable housing. There's not enough of it. You get up to a starter professional job, you're still below the average area median income, and there's not enough housing for those folks to stay, and we're losing our 24 to 30-year-olds in the city, our economic future, because they can't afford to live here. So there is a housing issue here in Alexandria, a number of housing issues that we need to solve.
Is there an Alexandria, what is it, AMR, the median income? AMI? Is there in other words, when we talk about the area, we're talking about, I assume, including Fairfax County and other locations which are in the area, but have, I'll say, different economic pressures. We are a city. Those communities are more residential. Is there a difference? Is the calculus different if we focus exclusively on Alexandria?
John, I don't know what you've seen. There is an area median income that is a little more regional. Alexandria doesn't have its own official, but I know that there is data that says Alexandria's area median, and we say median because that's half or greater and half or less, and it's a little more equitable than saying average, is just below that. It's not significantly below that. Why? Because with high housing costs, very many of the people who live here, have higher incomes, but many of the folks who work here can't live here.
Okay.
So, the housing office puts out some good statistics on this, and for, to hit that 30% threshold, in other words, you're only using 30% of your income for housing. For a one-bedroom apartment, you'd have to make $82,000. I won't go over the entire list of jobs, but they put out a list of the kinds of jobs. You go through, it's like almost 20 different jobs that are very prevalent here in Alexandria. And until you get to the last three, none of those will get you to that 82,000. But the other problem is that's an economic development problem too. That says we don't have the kind of jobs in Alexandria that allow you to live in Alexandria. And I would further say that most people that can afford to live in Alexandria, it's because they're either working outside of Alexandria or it's a two-income household that enables them to live in Alexandria. So if you build more multi-use housing where the ground floor is retail and small shops, those kinds of businesses are not going to generate the kind of income that will enable. So we get caught in this spiral, if you will. So we really need to have a more balanced economic outlook in the city. And even when you look at the type of housing, when you look at HUD studies and what they would consider to be a healthy housing market, we're way out of that. A healthy market would have, not more than about 50 to 60% single-family homes. We have 14%. You'd have about 20, 25% apartments, rental apartments. We're approaching 70% almost on that. So, we're out of balance in terms of having a healthy. So it goes back to your opening point that we need to have all kinds of housing, not just one type, because it also impacts the kind of future population and residents that you're going to have. If we're gearing primarily to rental, that's more of a transient population, not a long-term population. And the kind of rental housing that we're building or it's being developed is primarily 1 and 2 bedroom, which is not going to facilitate, families staying here. And then I'll shut up after this. But the other thing we don't tend to do is we don't ask the workforce what kind of housing they would like. We don't ask the question of them, what kind of housing do you want, so that we can model our housing to affect them. We just kind of dictate what it's going to be.
John has a thought, and then we're going to move to some more questions. By the way, they're pouring in here. So
two follow-ups is one is that I don't know. I talk to we employ a lot of young folks and a lot of people coming into the market that want to have smaller families, and the type of housing they want is 2 bedrooms that are walkable to 1 or 2 bedrooms that are walkable to grocery stores, that are walkable to transit, that are walkable to parks, that they don't have to use a car. So, what I think it's a little. It depends on who you talk to and what type of housing you want, but I agree that we need all types. The only thing I'll say on the economic development front is most times nowadays, one of the number one things that companies are looking for when they want to come to a jurisdiction is whether or not there's housing that's affordable to house their workforce.
And an infrastructure to get them
that's right.
to and from.
And so when Amazon put out their, big HQ2 RFP, one of the big things that said at the top of that is, what are you doing for affordable housing? And so as far as economic development and building economic development, that's what those companies are looking for. And regardless of what economic development you create, we need grocery stores. People like to go to coffee shops. People like to visit bars and restaurants. And the alternative to what building that housing here in Alexandria or building it within, walkable communities is building it somewhere where they have to commute, an hour away to get to fill that job. Ask people that have the early shift at the coffee shop or the donut shop what their number one stressor is making sure that they're going to have workers there in the morning to be able to open that shop up. Okay. And so economic development and housing really does go hand in hand in a lot of ways.
And geography. I mean, look, this is different than Austin, Texas, right? Where you can develop and go out, or someplace like that where it doesn't really we have a historically protected part of the city. We're not going to build single family there. We're a much more packed in, dense urban area than some of these other cities that in the Sun Belt, for example, that don't have a big problem. So I'm not so offended by that ratio here of rental versus single family that compares differently nationally. And I do think that a lot of young people want to rent. Their lifestyles are different than, I see a lot of people kind of my age in here, and it's a little different. I think younger people now don't necessarily want to have that single family home out in the suburbs with the fence and the dog and everything. And if they do, they want to rent the single family house, in many cases. So it's a problem, I guess, but it doesn't really keep me up at night.
Jeff, we got a lot of territory to cover. I got one kind of heavy-duty question that I do want to conclude this section with, and that is, I think there's a general understanding that we need more units. The question is, at what point have we solved, how many units do we need before we say, we've solved it, we've hit the target, declare victory, and know that we are there? Is this one of those things where you can never achieve enough, in which case, well,
demand will continue to grow. Every night there's new families being expanded. So demand is going to continue. So we're going to need to always have that supply and that ability to finance them, that ability to zone them quickly, that ability to match up maybe some property tax abatements or some other give backs to developers if they're going to put in affordable in their development to make it work. This is not going to be solved in any short period of time, I don't think. We just have to continue to make progress.
Yeah, I don't think you can't pick a number. I guess if we were to put up walls and say, we're not going to let anybody else in, and we're not going to grow our economy, and the people here are going to live as if we're on an island, then you could figure out the number of units, and I guess then theoretically you could solve the problem.
Well, how many are we short now? If we were to just say, right now, we need, 20,000 more affordable units. If we suddenly had the ability to create those 20,000 affordable units, then what would happen?
I would just say, I don't have that number off the top of my head. The 2040 housing plan that is being created right now is full of that kind of data, and they've had full-on market studies of what that is, but it's in the tens of thousands of units that we're short of affordable housing to meet the workforce that we need. The other studies, the regional analysis by the George Mason regional analysis, Lisa Sturban used to kind of work with that. She's now with the National Realtors Association, has put out numbers and numbers of studies of the number of units that we're short, not just in Alexandria, but as the region as a whole. And it's thousands of units, tens of thousands of units.
It's hundreds of thousands of units
and so
across the region.
And even if a factor of that, 20% needs to be affordable to, maintain a community where, people can live and work. It's in the tens of thousands. And so
there may be city council people here who know exactly, but I think the goal was to create roughly 700 new units a year, something like that. And last year was 1,300, so we're a little ahead of the game there. And you just need to have to keep speeding it up. It's not going to change.
So in 2013, we had 29,000, almost 30,000 apartments, rental apartments. And in 2025, we had almost 42,000. So that's, that's a 41% increase over that time. But I think the question again is, how much growth can Alexandria sustain? To say we just keep going. I mean, do we become Manhattan in 50 years? And if density is the solution, to affordability, then explain to me why Manhattan isn't the most affordable place to live in the U.S. So I think we have to put some parameters in. And then we have a bigger issue, which is this is regional. And if we are building at a more rapid rate than the rest of the region, people are going to come here. So it has to be proportional. I think we have to do a better job of yes, we're going to have to grow. That's without question. But growing in a reasonable pace and proportional to what other jurisdictions in the region are doing. It's not a race. And I think we really need to look at that, because in Virginia, we keep talking about housing as if it's housing for Alexandrians. We're really talking about housing for people who aren't here yet, who would like to come here. And that's fine, but there has to be a finite limit. We have 15 square miles.
Well, keep in mind, the property taxes support all of the services that people want. And so if you don't grow and you don't create new commercial or residential property and expand that base, then the existing property owners in the city are going to have an increase in their taxes to meet the needs of the citizenry. And I don't think that's really what people want, a closed economy where taxes are always going up to pay for the streets to be clean.
So we have jumped into the economics category, so I'm going to keep us going in economics. Does anybody know if there have been studies of cities like Alexandria, which are very close to a magnet like DC, that demonstrate that increasing the available supply also creates a measurable increase in the affordable supply?
Well, I think Montgomery County is a good example in many ways about this. They're creating a tremendous amount of housing out there. They got a great system. I mentioned Austin, Texas. City.
That's a unique situation, simply because
they're
the middle of
I
nowhere.
would say on a New York situation, the problem there is they've got about 70 or 80,000 vacant apartments that they won't even put on the market. Now, why won't they put them on the market? Because to get up to code, to comply with all of the things that are required to make an apartment appealing, costs a lot of money, but those apartments are capped on the rent. And so the owners aren't putting any. So, again, Manhattan's a different. I would look at Montgomery County if you want to.
And the difference between Montgomery County and Fairfax County and Arlington County, again, from an economic standpoint, is they have large Fortune 100 companies. We have zero. We are, tourist, hotel, and service. That's primarily what we are. So, property taxes that's what funds Alexandria. And, so if you don't change that equation to where you have, another kind of economic engine, then it becomes appealing to increase density, to increase land value, which increases property values, which increases property taxes, which provides more revenue for the city. That's not a recipe for growth of a livable Alexandria, in our opinion. If we're just feeding the city coffers, and that's the number one priority, then at some point Alexandria ceases to be a place where folks will want to live, and then maybe we get what we want as people exit. Then maybe prices come down as there's more vacancies.
Okay.
I would say that historically we did build enough housing to keep a supply to keep housing affordable. In the post-war Alexandria, we built tons and tons and tons of garden-style apartments, and we built in the 80s tons and tons of high-rise apartments in the west end of Alexandria that did keep rents and keep the city affordable. And over time, as we have slowed down building, there's no doubt it's a regional effort, and that our regional colleagues need to continue to build as well. I think, I don't have the numbers, so I hate to kind of comment on it, but I think it's a misnomer that Fairfax County and DC and Arlington aren't building as well. They're approving and building lots and lots of units. Even Loudoun County, if you look at the number of units that they're building there and the amount of money that they're putting into affordable housing, this year and this budget year eclipses all of the local jurisdictions. So I do think it's a regional issue, but I think all of the regions are continuing to build. But if you look at, how we used to build in Alexandria and, in the Boston Roslyn corridor in Arlington, over time, we have built, and we have.
I keep the answer short. We got a lot of territory to cover. Jill, you mentioned a few minutes ago that it is desirable for people to want to move, to stay in Alexandria as an adult where they grew up. Most people want to be able to afford a starter home. But the question is, when someone invests in a home, they're putting their biggest amount, it's their biggest investment, and at the same time, there is a desire to have your home appreciate in value, which gives you return on investment value for your home. And so you want your home to get more expensive so that you can, when you sell it, get a return. But that kind of works against the concept of we're constantly, there's your starter home prices then chasing appreciation values. Is there an inherent dichotomy between making homes affordable and giving people the value on their home investment that would allow them to upgrade later as their family expands?
No. If you look back, all the way back to post-World War II, when people were building houses as fast as they could throw them up, housing continued to appreciate. Apartments appreciate in value, duplexes appreciate in value, townhomes appreciate in value, single-family homes appreciate in value. We're nowhere near a point of saturation where anybody would have to worry about their home not appreciating in value. We do have a problem whereby people are staying in rentals longer than they might want to because they still want to be in this community and they can't afford to buy a home because there aren't starter homes being built. And a lot of that has to do with the financing and the economics of it. There's just, land costs are so high and building costs are so high. A starter home here is a condominium, and people just have to get used to that idea.
Are you saying that the appreciation that people experience is not contributing to the difficulty of finding a starter home at an affordable price?
The fact that there haven't been enough housing being built at any price point.
Okay.
Right? So it's not just starter homes, it's really at any price point. John did a nice job of laying out, the post-2008 world we live in. Go ahead.
When I first came to Old Town, I went down and I was going to buy a townhouse in Old Town. It was $100,000. Oh my God. I said, I can't do that. And it was very tiny. I said, who in the world is going to buy this thing for $100,000? Now, you pick a number, whatever it is, but the house itself did not appreciate in value. The land and the place and where it is appreciated in value. The actual structure itself, people were throwing money into it to keep it upgraded and to keep it going. So it was the location and the demand for that location that drives it up. And I don't know, I think that I want to be in a place where other people want to be and that there's a demand to be there and people want to be there because it provides things that we all want. That's the kind of community that I think is appealing to folk. But there is that tension between people want the value of their properties to go up, and at the same time they want to provide an opportunity for people who might be a little more economically disadvantaged to have an opportunity to have housing. Then they should. They should be able to have that opportunity.
Okay. John, there is a large swath of land right across the street from the Raddick Road metro station that used to have 50 or 60 single-family homes. And then about 4 years ago, they all got clobbered, and so that there could be a large building put there. And it's still empty. I walked by there yesterday, and it was just a grassy field. I remember, just south of Duke Street, Richmond Highway, there was all those garden apartments that got clobbered, and for 2 or 3 years there was nothing there. Can you explain, any of you guys, why it takes so long when we clear out all this housing to actually get us any kind of replacement at all?
Well, sure. I mean, number one, both of those situations were pretty unique in that the market changed on them a little bit. I don't think the number of units that were sitting across the street from the Braddock Metro equaled in total the number that maybe you suggest. But the fact of the matter is that deal at the time, whether it still is or not, was owned by Clark Building Group, and the Clark Building Group was going to partner with the Alexandria Redevelopment and Housing Authority to redevelop that site together. That deal fell through for one reason or another, and then they got it approved to build just their site, and then the market shifted, right? And so we're in an interest rate constrained market. So real estate has cycles, right? And it goes through cycles, and right now we're definitely in a cycle that's a slowdown because construction costs are high, interest rates are high, and it's hard to get going on a deal. That happened to that one. The deal on Route 1 South, I think you're talking about is south of Alfred Street Baptist Church. That project got going, had funding from a bank in San Francisco that ended up kind of falling into one of these issues, and it fell in hard times. Its capital stack kind of went away. They had to go find it again. You don't close a financing deal in a month when your capital stack falls away. So things go through cycles, but for the most part, when people tear things down, they get going because they don't want, they had an income producing asset, and so they get going. But things change and the market gets wonky sometimes.
Okay. I got my notice of 2026 real estate assessment in the mail a few weeks ago, and there was a little newsletter in there, and it said, and I'm quoting right out of the newsletter from the city, demand for existing residential single-family properties and condominiums resulted in an overall 4.4% increase to the residential assessments. And when I compared that number with the others, it was the largest contributor to the residential tax base. Does that mean that the city benefits from having a lot of single-family houses? And I'm not sure who should answer that, but that was a puzzler to me.
Well, I think the city would benefit more if there were commercial properties.
Yes.
The tax rate on them would be better, and they could put them over on Eisenhower Avenue, but that probably doesn't answer your question, sorry.
No, okay, I don't know.
The other factor in that is that we have approximately 9,000 single-family detached homes in Alexandria. That number has not changed in the last 15 years. So you have no movement. We're not building new homes. When you see a new single-family home being built, it's usually replacing one that was there before. It's a tear down and a rebuild. So that's one of the reasons why you're able to see that kind of appreciation. So for right now, that benefits the city tremendously to the point that you made. But
conversions definitely do. Conversions definitely, because that's probably an obsolete building that is valued at some lower rate.
Jeff, when you say conversion, you're talking about commercial to residential conversion?
Yeah, I'm talking about
that,
like an office building that people don't go to work anymore. They sit at home on their computers. And so the office building has now lost value, and it's being taxed at a lower value. But if it's converted into condominiums or rental, of which there is a fair amount of conversions going on in Alexandria, and you ought to be proud of that. You know, it's better than ripping the building down, because if you rip it down, you're going to have environmental issues with all the things there. Anyway, that's one thing you could do to increase the tax base.
But the cost of converting usually means you're going to have a more expensive unit.
Well, not necessarily, because if you convert, you're going to have to allocate a certain percentage of the units into affordable. And, you know, yes, it's expensive to convert, there's no question, because there's only bathrooms on one floor, and there's only, you know, window lines might not be the right way, and all of that kind of thing. But if the city, and the city has done a good job providing abatements in different ways to encourage conversions, and it's better than having the building sit empty, because then the tax base really is at a drain.
So I want to ask you that question though, because when we talked, it occurred to me, and I want to tease this out. We were talking a few minutes ago about we need more commercial. That right now the residential to commercial balance is out of whack, and the residential taxes are really essentially supporting the whole city. If we are converting office units to residential, we're adding residential, and we're essentially eliminating the possibility of commercial going into that building. So
Yeah, well, most of those
are we hurting ourselves by doing that?
Right, but modern businesses probably don't want to be in those buildings anyway.
That's right. Believe me, the owners of those buildings would much rather lease them to commercial office tenants than convert them to residential. It's much, much better to their bottom line if they had a robust market to be able to rent those units. The fact of the matter is that after COVID and the hybrid work schedules and the work from home schedules is here to stay, and the office market is a flight to quality, to flight to, you know, smaller spaces that are Class A spaces, and a lot of the Class B, Class C office spaces that were in a lot of parts of the city are just not a desirable real estate product anymore.
Right. Just like the school is so much different than a school that we probably went to, all this open space, they want different amenities, they want different things. And a modern business that is occupying office space wants a different experience in order to attract the workers to come and work for that.
And they can have a lesser footprint and still create the same value for their business.
Yeah, I mean, to Roy's point, we are increasingly dependent upon residential property taxes to support the city. That's nothing that the city is doing wrong. That is a nationwide issue. And the office vacancy rate in Alexandria is 20%-ish, as it is in all of the neighboring markets. And you can either let those Class B, Class C offices sit idle and deteriorate and continue to lose market value and therefore taxable value, or you can do something with them so that they get to their highest and best use and produce more taxes to support the infrastructure that we've all come to depend on, and those single-family homes don't have as big of increase as they otherwise would if that wasn't happening.
Let's talk about the infrastructure. That kind of tees up a question that I was going to save, but I think we want to talk about it now. As we do these conversions and we add more residential, more people to the population, it is going to mean that we're going to need more city services, police, fire, school, et cetera, which will have to be funded through residential property taxes and the like. So my question is, and do we know, has the city done an analysis that says that we are not going to, will the residential growth be able to sustain itself as we add people, just because we're not necessarily correcting the balance between commercial and residential tax?
Probably not, but that's why development around transit is a good thing, and what's going on at, I guess it's Victory or whatever it is over on Eisenhower Avenue, that thing, and a lot of other developments are close to transportation, metro stops. And so transit-oriented development is a big thing. And these conversions are a small part of the, you know, I'm talking about big, 500, 400 unit places in other parts of the city that should be transit-oriented things.
Well, and I would say the city does do that analysis, and they do it on an ongoing basis, and they do it every time something comes before them for approval. John can tell you that, on his projects, he has to be able to speak to schools impact, traffic impact, stormwater impact, and often has to pay hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars to mitigate any impacts on the infrastructure. I'm vice president of my HOA. Why does the city have HOAs? So that they can offload the cost of city services to those people who live in those HOAs, right? And that's another way of managing that cost. So,
And impact fees are a lot of it, and you mentioned it.
That's right.
They're either doing the curb and gutter, whatever you want to call it, or they're contributing money to the local governments, or they're buying green space and keeping it green, something like that. So the impact
right.
fees is a big, it's not just the taxes.
But too often, those studies are site-specific. They deal with that particular project and what that project, the impact that project is going to have on infrastructure and so on and so forth. And those studies often are done. The city requires that the developer do those studies and submit the results of those studies. What we don't see are cumulative studies that look at how these cumulative things come up. And since I've lived here for 28 years, and I have yet to see where any development that has gone on here in the last 28 years was going to have an impact on schools. In fact, I can remember when we were getting rid of schools because we had excess capacity, and now we're bursting at the seams. So yes, markets change. There is a cycle, but we don't seem to pay attention to that. We don't seem to look at the fact that we maybe the market will change in the future, and we need to have a plan B for that. So infrastructure is a concern, and we have some aging infrastructure, particularly when you talk, and it's nationwide. Water is one of the biggest ones. Our water infrastructure.
Most of the potholes on Washington Street have now been filled, but
I think, though, that you wouldn't hear anybody either in this room, the city council, at the local government say, we don't need to expand our commercial tax base. I think that's a pretty common thing that everybody is saying. I don't know that that's always the question, though. Like, if we had a question of, hey, this aging office building, if we could turn that into name your Fortune 100 company or a multifamily residential building, I think we'd take the Fortune 100 company every day of the week. They're not knocking down your door. The question ends up being, I understand that the infrastructure has to come with as a continuum, not site specific. I think but the city does do small area plans and other things to kind of look at these things. But it's usually not that in a vacuum, that it is either big economic commercial tax base item or multifamily residential. It is multifamily residential or, remaining vacant office building or remaining aging whatever. So I think it's kind of a little bit of a misnomer that everybody doesn't think that we need to expand our commercial tax base. I think AEDP in the city does a nice job. Getting Virginia Tech to Potomac Yard was a big deal. Getting the IDI or IDA over there is a big deal. The hospital is a big deal. So there's a lot of these things that are economic generators that, obviously the Patent and Trade Office isn't what it was.
But those are not necessarily all tax generators.
They're not, but
right?
the office buildings around them are.
And the economic generator, the same thing that we talked about with housing also goes with that is, we can't fence Alexandria off and say, well, you can only work at the new Innova if you live in Alexandria. So there are going to be people that are going to commute in to Alexandria.
But that's even more reason why to build more housing.
But I think one of the outcomes from the economic summit that I see Councilman Chapman's here that he sponsored. We didn't want to hear it, but one of the questions was, why don't we have a Fortune 100 company? And the outcome was, you're not going to get one. this, your your goose, your golden egg is, tourism, history. So that's where you need to look at how you can, develop that. So yeah, we're not going to, we need to put that aside. So we need to be thinking about other ways that we can generate business that is, geared toward what seems to be our sweet spot here, and not kill that golden goose as we grow and develop.
I'm just curious, and I'm going to throw this question at everybody, but I'll start with you at this end, Roy. How would you like the city to balance the interests, which sometimes are conflicting, between developers, homeowners, citizens in need, and the companies that we want to attract?
Yeah, I think the key here is having that multifaceted strategy. That recognizes all these complexities and brings these groups together so that we fully understand what their issues are, what the issues of homeowners are, what the issues of, you mentioned the fact that, younger people have different, needs and different desires. Get that, 44% of our population is under 40, okay? But, I'm a little long in the tooth, but when I was part of that population, when I was right out of college, I didn't want to live in a single family home. I wanted to live in a condo. I wanted to live in an apartment. But your circumstances change over time, and if you want to have that ability to keep people here and let them migrate to different phases of their life where they might have different needs, we just need to make sure that we have a balance. Okay. And so you bring those groups together to try to determine what that balance is. And it seems right now policy is pushing us to get rid of or marginalize the single family detached home to the point that they're going to get more and more expensive, and it'll be a self-fulfilling prophecy, and then that won't be available at some point in Alexandria. There always will be, but it'll be it'll only be for the more affluent.
Okay, Jeff, do you want to take a crack at this one?
It says it well. Get all the interested stakeholders together. I do think that part of the problem on solving most of these issues is a lack of agreement on what the problem is. And what are we trying to solve here? Is it the low-income housing problem? Is it the workforce housing problem? What is it? But I think Roy says it very well. The issue that keeps resonating with me is just where are you going to put these single-family homes in the city of Alexandria? It's a limited amount of space, and the only housing really that you can do here, I think, in any volume, is to go up. And that's not a single-family house. But I'm not disagreeing with you on the need for it. I just don't know where that would be, unless I don't know.
John,
the number I heard earlier was about 9,000. Is that single family? I think that I hate to sound like this, but I think that's going to be about it, folks. I think that's about the number of single-family houses that you're going to have in the city of Alexandria. Because let's just talk about, if you are taking vacant land and are going to build back single-family houses, we've seen that, look next to Bethel. Not everybody likes the houses that were built there, but those are the single-family houses that are going to be built new, and they're going to be 5,000, 4,500 square foot houses that are.
But that's a policy decision.
Well,
that's
but
a policy decision.
It's a market decision.
No, but it's
you're
also
not building
a
a
policy
15. You're not building a 2,000 square foot single-family house.
Okay.
I guess the point is that what I think that we maybe need to continue to think about is there something between a single-family house and 7, 10-story, 5-story multifamily, and I think a lot of that is 2-over-2s, duplexes, quads, townhouses. Like that is the new kind of starter houses that work in in urban areas. And there are some of that stuff being built in and around. We've built some. I'm not going to go into that right now. Glad to talk about it. But the, across from the hospital, they're building a multifamily residential unit, but they're also building some 2-over-2 kind of stacked townhouse type of product, which is probably going to be more of your starter middle income house in Alexandria for years to come. You said earlier that what it's going to become is the only people that can afford a single family house are the very well-to-do. I would say it's not. We're there. That's not coming. For the most part, there's a lot of people in this city that have gotten their mortgage when it was $100,000 or $200,000, and they have grown, and they've grown and appreciated tremendous wealth. But I think a lot of those people, if they really had to go and buy that house today, they might not be able to afford it, because the average single family house in the city, don't hold me to this, but it's probably around $1 million.
Or they may have gotten their home at a very low interest rate, as I said, in the teens, at very low rates, and now maybe they want to be an empty nester, but they can't afford to move because they now have to move into a house that will have a mortgage on it that today's 30-year mortage, I think, was at 6.1 or
Shelley,
something like that.
you had a thought, and then
Well, I was just-
Roy was. I don't want.
I was going to say, yeah, the average single-family home price is like 1.1 million in Alexandria. The average home price is over 800,000. So, again, we talk about you need more housing of all types to make it affordable. And, how do you do that? You're going to have to build denser. People don't like density because of the infrastructure, but I'm still going to maintain that if you build more housing for the people who live here or want to live here, they want to live here because it's a great place to live, and our challenge is to keep it a great place to live while increasing affordability so that our sons and daughters can live near the neighborhood that they grew up in, so that the people who already work here can live here and become part of the community.
Roy, you wanted to,
Yeah,
and
so-
I didn't want to interrupt, so
Yeah,
go ahead.
when I was talking about policy, and part of that is a density solution too, but density doesn't always mean going this way. So maybe if you want starter homes, you talk about smaller homes on smaller lots. That's a policy decision. That's changing lot size, frontages, and maybe you don't have a large backyard, but there are people that would like that, and that would be a starter home. But the policy decisions that have been made to date take those smaller, affordable, and I use that with quotes because your numbers are correct. Those 1,000 square foot, 1,200 square foot bungalows, right? The World War II, post-World War II little homes. They get bought up, sold, and you turn them into quads and townhouses and small apartments or whatever. So you're taking the single family off the table when you do that. I'm not saying that we have to increase all the numbers, but you could make decisions to change lot sizes. You could make decisions that would require smaller footprint homes on those, and that would create a kind of single family home. The policies we have now are geared toward eliminating the smaller, older single-family homes and replacing them with these other types. And that will only exacerbate the issue of having, any kind of transition for people who don't win the lottery. So that's all I'm saying.
The only kind of pushback, if there would be, is on this conversion thing that we were talking about. So these buildings that are converted, in Alexandria anyway, and a lot of places, have different, residential lots have a bigger setback, okay, than office buildings. So if you convert an office building, arguably, you should have to establish that setback. But Alexandria, those of you who are, again, on the council, you know this, so you get to keep the old. You don't have to do that. And so I guess my point is those are already small lots. They're existing buildings that can be converted, and we ought to do more of that. That's the product that is out there that can be made into housing right now.
One of the issues with density that keeps coming up, and a lot of these questions are around the idea that we encourage increased density, but we don't allow for parking. That is, there are buildings that are being built, and the developer is going with the density, and they're getting that, but they're also getting a reduction in the requirement for parking spaces. The assumption is that people aren't going to need cars because they walk everywhere. And as a person who lives in a neighborhood where I can walk anywhere, if I didn't have a car, I couldn't be parked in this parking lot here to participate in this tonight. So there is a concern in the community that we're not doing a good job of protecting basic, good old American, apple pie and Chevrolet, that we have this concept within the city that people they're not going to need cars because everything's walkable. Why is that?
I think it's people, there are people in some jobs who will continue to need cars. What I'm finding, and this comes to some things that John said earlier, is, when I grew up, I couldn't wait to get my license, I couldn't wait to own my car, blah, blah, blah. My kids, they weren't excited at all to get their license. They didn't really care about owning a car. Now, they ended up having to because they moved to California and needed a car. But a lot of the younger people that I work with and talk to, if they can live near transit, and between that and Uber and Lyft and renting a car when they need one, that is way more cost effective than owning a car. They don't pay upkeep, they don't pay, they don't buy a car that depreciates immediately, they don't have, all of those other costs. And so for them, especially since we've said for folks who were in those starter jobs that may have been great launching pads for us, but for the generations coming behind us, it's still a struggle for them as they get started and established in their careers. A car is not necessarily a part of the equation. Or if you're a married couple, you might have one car instead of two cars. And they make it work because we are in a transit-rich environment. So I think that's part of what's driving that reduction in parking. Having said that, in the dense, small lot, single-family neighborhoods that surround where I live, it's a nightmare.
Okay.
I would ask people to keep an open mind in that and look past your experiences of the past, because my office, we have between 35 people that come to the office, at least 3 or 4 times a week, and we've done these numbers. 75% of them don't have a car. They use the bus, which is free in Alexandria. They use trains. They use a bunch of other things. So that's number one. Number two, this is not going to be, with people that want us to build more parking, this is not going to be a popular sentiment. But believe me, most developers, I'm not saying all, but most developers, they want to build the right amount of parking, right? They don't want to build they don't want an underparked building where they can't rent units because people have a demand for a parking space. And so I think what historically, we have changed our parking regs in the city a lot, and I think you see probably less and less, reductions in parking. But I can testify, our station at Potomac Yard property in Alexandria was built in 2008. It was built to the old parking code, and we still have basically a full level of underground parking that very rarely gets used. We've done some deals over time to, rent that out to a car lot or a restaurant or something that's using that. But at the time, in 2010, 2008, that was $50,000 a space of a whole level of underground parking that doesn't get used. Now it's more like $75,000 to $80,000 a concrete parking space in a structure, and you don't want to build too much of that because it's then less money for affordable housing, less money for parks, less money for schools and sewers or wherever that money can go. You don't want to build too much parking. I understand we don't want to build not enough parking either, but times are changing. Autonomous vehicles are coming. All kinds of other things that are going to lead to less on-site parking demand are right around the corner.
And I don't disagree with you. but I think again it goes to this issue of everybody being at the table and not a one-size-fits-all. And yes, that younger demographic is more in line with what you're saying. I got a 42-year-old son, and he does like to drive. I totally get that. But the other part of this, as we get back to the affordability issue, is when we see those kinds of offsets, are we seeing a wholesale reduction in housing costs? In other words, are the developers turning that saved revenue, to their renters, to the buyers, or are they just chalking up, higher, return on investment?
I think it's enabling them to do the deal. I think these are very low margin transactions to begin with, and I think they're putting it back in there. By the way, most urban areas around the world are discouraging cars from even coming into their cities, or having a toll for people to come in. So I'm not concerned that we're restricting cars in Old Town. I think it's kind of nice. And wait till the driverless cars
I
come.
agree that all people should be around this conversation to talk about it and to figure out what the right amount of parking is. I think the hard thing to agree on is what the right amount of parking is. That's right.
So that leads me to my next question. Shelley, so the city had a comprehensive housing plan in 2013, and now we're in the process of creating the Housing 2040. So is there convergence to consensus? Are you seeing all voices weighing in on it? And where is that going to head? And what are the differences between where we are now and where 2040 wants to take us?
Well, all voices have an opportunity to weigh in. It doesn't go forward for council approval for a couple of months. I think comments closed yesterday, but I'm confident if you sent comments in, housing staff would love to hear them.
So they've published, I'm afraid I might be out of it here. So they did publish a draft for comment?
Yes.
Okay.
A draft has been published for comment. The comment period has been open for quite some time. There was an open house a couple of weeks ago that the public was invited to. There were specific sessions on senior housing and home ownership, and help me out, John, I'm going to forget one or two of them. But in addition to that, there were stations set up all over where you could just walk up and talk to city staff about what was on your mind and have all of your comments recorded. So, there's certainly been an outreach effort and an effort to reach across the city in terms of geography, demographics, and those sorts of things. I would say Housing 2040, it's very comprehensive in terms of its goals and recommendations. It's got a broader approach than the Housing Master Plan did, which was more focused just on affordable and committed affordable housing. There's a more focus on preservation, because a lot of the committed affordable housing will lose its statutory commitments and be converted to market rate. And that's the cheapest way to keep your affordable housing, is to keep what you already have and not have to build new. So there's preservation strategies, there's senior strategies, it's very, very, very comprehensive. I think the piece that's yet to come is those hard targets. There were some hard targets in the Housing Master Plan, which the city met, and congratulations. We talked earlier about what the needs are regionally and who's doing well and who's not. And ULI and COG put out studies the same year in 2019 that said we needed in the range of 250 to 300,000 new homes by 2030. And there are some jurisdictions that are working to meet those targets, and Alexandria is one, and there are some that are missing them more broadly and are really trying to step up their game. So everybody is contributing. But those kinds of targets still need to be folded into the plan. There are strategies for the affordable housing, how to more effectively fund it without just having to write a check. So if you haven't, take a look at the plan, because it is broad-based and comprehensive to the point that it will. It takes a while to get through.
Okay.
But I think it's the other thing that remains to be seen is the phasing for the recommendations and what the city wants to tackle first. And we'll see how council comes out on that.
All right, we're very close on time. There's a lot that we didn't cover. Real quick, Jeff, can you summarize, because you also operate, you're an Alexandrian for a gazillion years, but you also operate at a national level. Can you talk a little about what's happening with the House and Senate regarding this housing bill that has gone through?
Sure. Well, both the House and the Senate have passed a housing bill, and it's probably, they're not the same, but they've each passed their version of a housing bill. Both versions are probably the biggest housing bill that's been done in maybe decades. Both are passed with bipartisan support. The Senate bill, I think, had 93 votes, and the House bill had 380, something like that. So bipartisan bills. I would say that the House bill might be tilted a little bit more toward encouraging more supply developed, and the Senate bill is a little bit more toward juicing up government programs, HUD, financing programs and rental assistance and things. Not necessarily saying they're bad, but those are the kind of the differences. There's a big difference that is kind of the controversial one. The Senate is saying that no more institutional capital in the housing markets, and the House bill is silent on that. That's a big problem. You know, my opinion is you ought to be encouraging as much capital as you can get into housing to develop as much housing as you possibly can. But that's kind of a tension point. I think they'll reach agreement within, any relatively short period of time. Now, in Washington, a short period of time could be, a few decades, but
Yeah.
I think we're moving in the right direction there. The only other thing that I would say just about, there were people that lived here before us and people that lived here before them and before them and before them, and those people always wanted to have their community be the same. But it couldn't always be the same because everything was changing. Demand was changing, people were changing, and it always changed. And I just think we have to have that attitude that people, how they want to live and work and travel is changing. And the community needs to evolve. And by the way, I will stop on this. I think that some of the things that, as I said a couple of times, I think that it's been a very positive situation for development and opportunities in Alexandria, from what I hear from the people that I know that are developing here. And that's a good thing.
Gotta keep moving. The final question of the night, given the theme, and we're gonna go along the table. So Shelley first, then John, Jeff, and Roy. Based on our conversation tonight, are there solutions we can agree on? Shelley?
I think we've agreed that housing affordability writ broadly is certainly an issue in Alexandria. I don't know that we agreed on how we tackle it.
Okay. John?
I think there's some things that we agree on. I think that and the key word is going to continue to be density, and how people feel and react and think about density is something that is to be debated and to continue to be discussed. But I don't think that you solve the housing crisis that we started off without density. Density alone is not going to solve it, but some levels of density is going to, and so that is the thing that
You're saying the thing, it's where is the balance?
And I think that, I don't think that you're ever in either one night or 1 year or 1 decade going to draw the line of where exactly the balance is, because I think that balance continues to morph and mold as communities evolve and continue to grow, and changes of preferences continue to evolve. I think, as Shelley said, when we talked early in the conversation about affordability and the inability for people to live and work here, I saw a lot of head shaking. I think a lot of folks saying that the affordability issue in the city and maybe in the region is a problem. How we, solve that and what the balance is, I think will continue to evolve.
Okay, Jeff?
I think we agreed that, what did we agree on? I think we kind of agreed that it's going to take a long time to get out of this problem, and we shouldn't expect to get out of it overnight. It's going to take everybody in the boat kind of pulling the oars in the same direction. And I think we all agreed that we want to keep Alexandria in its livable, sustainable state. And it's how do you do that? How do you solve a problem over time and yet still be appealing to livability, sustainability, how we go about it? And that's the tension.
Roy, over to you.
Yeah, I think that, we kind of agreed that, we can talk about this. We can talk about it in a civil way. And I think that, we need to bring all the stakeholders together and really have, ongoing comprehensive conversations. So we ask the question, you asked the right question, what is the problem we're trying to solve? And it's not that simple. There are multiple what are the problems we're trying to solve. And why are they problems? How did those problems come about? Because if you don't know how the problem came about, you're not really going to be able to solve it. So I think if anything, we can agree that, it's not a one-size-fits-all. We need to ensure that everyone is getting something out of this in a positive way. And yes, we have to move forward. And yes, we have to grow. But I'm tired of the realpolitik. I'm tired of zero-sum game. I think that's the wrong approach, and we seem to be trapped in that as a nation, as a state, as a region, and unfortunately, I think even somewhat in Alexandria, where it's my way or the highway. And I think this is a good start, and I'd love to, be involved in the conversation. I'd love to work with all of you and bring others, to the table. And we have so much intellectual capital here in Alexandria, so much that we just don't tap into. And I don't think there's a problem, and I don't think housing is an exception that the people who live here can't help solve, because we've got great minds in this city. We just need to tap into them, get them together, and we can solve these problems.
On that note, I want to thank our panel for very interesting discussion. If you guys want to stick around, I think folks might have questions for you, and if you don't mind sticking around, just talking to our attendees, that would be great.
This is Agenda Alexandria, a non-partisan organization that takes a look at the issues without taking sides. Whether it's the city's sewer system, education, public safety, climate change, or perhaps a look back into Alexandria's history, Agenda Alexandria is here to shine a light. What makes the organization so successful is our people. The people who run it, our panelists, our moderators, and of course, our members. Agenda Alexandria is a member-funded organization, and we invite you to become one today by visiting agendaalexandria.org.